RCC that is catering this mission. And main our aid like concept is that we want to facilitate the women of all ages, okay, and their families from different and diverse background. And main purpose and the main mission is to eradicate the violence and empowering the women so they rebuild their life and they become economically stable and they know what exactly they want to do. So for that purpose, we are providing different services, and in further, I will explain you that one. And all those services are free. The one key principle, which I really like honestly, is that we don't turn away anyone. If we at that person we don't are offering that program or project, we do have different our partners, we refer that woman to those project as well. So we are providing crisis intervention. We refers to different organizations. We are providing counseling. We are providing mentorship, and mentorship not only in the counseling form. We also, as a project coordinator, I'm providing mentorship for business development as well. And we are also supporting newcomers in so many different ways, which I will discuss later. We perform different workshops, and there are youth programs as well. We provide different kind of trainings, and there is outreach programs, worker cooperatives, and the development programs. Main object again is to that we want to serve the community, and especially we want to serve the women of this community because they are suffering a lot and they are lagging behind. Okay, so basically we want to provide them. The main program is that we are providing that trauma counseling. And so far we have in this program, in this year only, we have facilitated 500 clients thus, and they improve their emotional well-being and resilience. There is another program that is an empowering immigrants through mentorship programs, and in this one, that is Together We Can. That is that the main logo of that program. What we have to do is that we provided different programs for the youth so they improve their communication skills, and they also improve their other skills that includes the computer literacy as well. And that those the programs, those help them to get a better job, and they also help them to become financially stable as well through business. And once they get that kind of a knowledge, they become survive better in this country. Then other program is that employment one, and sorry, that sorry, mental health one, sorry. Yeah. So I'm extremely sorry. I'm just okay. So oh, sorry, I just missed few. I have to do this one. Okay. So this was the one we were talking about. Then we have a career counseling one. It's just like that welcome center. Like that in welcome centers, they provide different kind of facilities. So our organizations under YESD offer a career counseling. We help them in writing the resume writing, finding out a job for them, like searching guidance to find out the job. Although we do not give them that job, but we provide them the way through which they will be able to get that job. And we do have partnership with 33 organizations. And through this program, we are trying to bridge the skill gap that is there. Like, because most of the people are very skilled, honestly, they have a very good educational background, but they don't know how to write down a resume. So when they apply for a job, they don't get any return calls, and they become frustrated, right? And they become stressed as well. So we have guided them how to develop a resume according to the Canadian, standard, and they have to go through all that checklists, and then they become, easily get a proper job offer or an interview call. Then there is an Housing and Stability for Immigration project. This is called YITW. That is a Youth in Transition Workers program. So, in which we do have a list of housing and rental assistance programs. So, whosoever is coming here, and if they don't have any kind of a housing and all that, we do know where exactly they will have to go, and we will guide them that what are the procedures. If they follow those procedures and the document requirement, then they will be able to get those houses, right? So this is one of the project. Then we have that again, as I told you before, that mental health is very more important part of this whole organizations. We are providing a mental health support to immigrants, to even non-immigrants, to adults, to youngsters, and we do have very young youth as well. They are coming here for counseling, and all the sessions are for free. We are available. We have a number of counselors available, those who are providing these kind of services. And remember one thing, that we believe in confidentiality, and we always ensure that thing. So it's free, and it's and honestly, it's a culturally sensitive clinic counseling as well. Then there is one of the project is a senior social inclusion project. In this project, if for example the people are coming from other countries, and we know that youngsters are very much busy in getting a job and want to get themselves settled and want to look toward a house as well. But what about the old people? What about the seniors? They left behind. They felt so much stressed because they don't know the language, right? They don't know the culture and all that. So in this project, although want to invite you all on 28th, if anybody is interested, on 28th we are having an intergenerational event, and that is from 4 to 8 p.m. And if anybody is interested, they can email me. I will send them on the details of that event. It's for seniors. So what we do is, to seniors we arrange different kind of games, programs, to involve them into that one, so they don't feel left behind, and they are become they know the other part of the community members as well. And we also provide, if anybody need any kind of a transportation service, they simply call us, and under that project we provide them that facility. For example, if someone has a medical appointment or something, they can call us, and our under this project we will provide them those services. Then the last one is the workers cooperative development. I'm the project coordinator of worker cooperative project. So the main objective of this project is that through this model of cooperative development, I will tell you that is little bit, no doubt, it's a part of an entrepreneurship or a business, but it's little bit different than an individual business, because when we do an individual business, there are so many middlemen comes, right? So it's a cooperative setup. What the cooperative setup is, when three or more than three people together and they do a business. So everybody contributes their skills into that one. Okay, so the main purpose is that we want to promote economically independent community. And so don't depend on any middleman, or there should not be any hierarchy as in everything there are. So in the cooperative world, if there are three or more members, they have one vote, all are same, there is no hierarchy at all. So they can work together as a team. Okay, so in the cooperative one, uh, we are providing certain services. We are providing mentorship. We are providing one-on-one support. If anybody is interested in doing a business, they come to us. We will tell them that yes, you don't have money, it's okay. You don't have skills, it's okay. You will come to us. We will provide you those skills that are required for business development. We are providing them one-to-one mentorship. We are providing them training on 6 business skill development. We provide them training on 7 principles of co-op. Then we also tour different cooperatives, and we have a different discussion forums, and that is specifically for the cooperative. And then we then and that we provide them a very good network of opportunities with the different cooperative stakeholders. At the end, for example, they have gotten, I have seen in the attendees that there are more than 10 of my clients of my co-op are here. So I have seen that yes, they know, they like, whenever I say that yes, we are going to talk about the cooperative, they suddenly come there. So I'm really thankful to all of them. The main purpose behind this thing is that you have to stand up on your own feet through teamwork. Okay, there is no boss, there is no inferior, there is no superior, all are same. And then what we can do is we provide them all those training that are required for business development that starts from the scratch, like where you want to do your business. So here we give 6 ideas. We says, if you want to open a daycare, if you want to do an hairdressing business, if you want to do a sewing one, or an artist one, or a cleaner, or a PSW, come to us, right? And it's not minimum to these six, just we give them an idea that right now we are working and establish six cooperatives. And this is the second year of our project, and we have developed these six groups. And these six groups, what they have done during that time frame is they have got the training how to develop a business plan, how to do a financial management, how to do marketing, how to develop their own website, how to mingle with friends, how to do the negotiation and all that, how to buy the product. So there is a science behind that. So we provide different kind of training to everyone, to all those people who comes within this number of cooperatives. One of the biggest groups so far is the PSW and the cleaner ones, but the most active one is the sewing one. And they are even in the phase of developing their own website. They have developed the logos, name, and everything. So we are providing these services. The conclusion, because I have talked about different so many projects. I talk about trauma center, I talk about home, all that. So I have minimized everything in this slide is what exactly, if you need any kind of counseling, you can contact WMRCC. We are providing free of cost, culturally sensitive, confidential support for survivor of trauma. We are providing employment services. We are providing in cultural integration. There are different programs where you can come and meet the people from different cultures. There are youth mentorship program. If you are looking for a job and you want to get your resume tailored, you can come to us and we are providing that. There is different computer classes as well, where we are providing computer literacy programs. There is a senior program as well. If you have seniors who are getting bored at their home, they can join this program. And believe you me, they will learn a lot about the Canadian culture, about different cultures, about different religions and programs, and they will feel relaxed. And then last but not the least is the workers cooperative programs, in which we are supporting the people to establish their own business, okay, and their own cooperative business. So once they do it, believe you me, they will become economically stable. Thank you. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Any question, please?
Thank you, Aisha. That was amazing. That is
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Any questions, you guys feel free to put it in the chat, or if you wanted to raise your hand. That was fantastic. That is so much good resources. Okay. Awesome. And Karen, did you want to speak more to One Vision, One Voice?
Yes, I sure can.
Okay.
So as Chris mentioned, there are 11 practice principles, and we really work hard to find ways to put those principles into our practice. So we will really work hard. We do every phone call that comes in that a family is identified as Black, we will do an anti-Black racism consult. So that's to ensure that there's no racism embedded in the report that we're receiving. And as I said earlier, we noticed because we do this on every call that involves a Black family, we're able to identify problems like this. So it was really important for us when we notice this, what's trending, that we do something about it. And this is the whole point of One Vision, One Voice, is that we see things happening. We've got a lens on our community and on child welfare, and we can ensure that our families are being treated well through the process because we're putting in things to safeguard families. But there's also a social piece, and that piece is leading to these reports. And, in some, having a child welfare history is not a good thing, and it can be problematic sometimes in some forms of employment. So it's really important that everybody is armed with the information they need to kind of stay away from child welfare, as it were. Or if you get involved for any reason, that you have people you can call on. And Aisha, that's Women's Multicultural Resource Center is an amazing resource. So people really should,
Mhm.
you have such a wide variety of programs that there's something for everyone. And we collaborate quite a bit with this program. Also, I just wanted to mention Clinique. This is a program through Durham Community Health Center, which is for African Caribbean families. And they have Black doctors who are taking on patients, but also you don't have to have OHIP. So if you are, have medical concerns or of that kind and you don't have OHIP, that's not a barrier for you. You can always get medical services through Clinique, which you will find at Durham Community Health Center. So I'd just like to add that information. Thank you, Melissa.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Karen. Oh, that's fantastic. All right, so I'm just gonna pop. Oh, we have a Naomi. You can talk.
Hello,
Hi. Go ahead,
hi.
Naomi.
I'm Naomi. I have a question for Aisha and for Karen. For Aisha, how can one get in touch with WMRCC?
You can call me. I will leave my number on the chat. Okay. You can call me. You can email us. And honestly, to myself, you can call me from anytime,
Oh, thank
right?
you.
Because honestly, most of my clients, they even call me at 11 p.m. So no problem. I just leave my official number. I will leave my mobile number so you can contact us.
Oh, thank you. And for Karen, that one for clinic. How can someone get the help?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
That one for clinic. Clinic. Okay. How can I get help? That one for doctor. For a doctor.
Oh, Clinique. I will put some information in the chat for you that you can contact Durham Community Health Center. And Clinique is a program within DCHC. So, yeah, I'll put that information in the chat for you, for everybody.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Naomi. Awesome. All right, so I will begin my portion. Let me just share my screen. Okay. And like here. Okay. Okay, there we go. This took a while to load. All right, so again, hi everyone. Thanks so much for coming and thank you so much for being here today. I just wanted to shed some light on our Canadian education school system and just how it kind of differs from others. And then feel free as I'm presenting, if you have any questions, to put them in the chat or raise your hands and we can go through them. So with just the overview, and also coming to Canada, finding out how does anti-Black racism look in the school system, because it's very much prevalent. An overview of inclusive student services, which is formerly known as special education. So students who have a learning disability, and then some just tips and tricks for navigating school and having your child have a successful education. All right, so we have kind of like our own Ontario public education system. We have either the French stream, the English stream, and we also do Catholic and public board. Okay, so it's publicly funded, so it's free to attend school. And it's different than United States because the United States will be more private education. And in other countries, they have more centralized. So ours is kind of, each province kind of maintains their own education system, and it's free to attend school. What we don't have, which would be ideal, would be like a publicly funded food program. So students do have to come bringing their own lunches. And I think in the future of having food being served at school would be very beneficial to families, but not right now. Everyone has to come bring their lunch, and there are some breakfast programs, but for the most part, schools do not give food to students. So when you come into the school system, and if you're in Ontario school system and you want to know, what is my child learning? What are they doing in school? All the curriculum documents are online. They've moved them all from the paper booklets, which are below, to an online system where you can see each expectation that the students are learning. It's a bit different from other countries. So I know in Trinidad, they have like each student gets like books and they learn from like a social studies book or a math book. With Ontario, we get the curriculum, so we get what we're required to teach, but it's up to each educator to implement the curriculum in different ways. So that leaves a lot of room for like being creative with the curriculum, but it also leaves room for biases and prejudice being impacted on the education system. So the books that we choose, teachers can choose the books. So what books they're choosing, whether it be more Eurocentric books or books that don't have Black main characters, those are all kind of like dependent on the educators. So because it's so open in Ontario, there leaves a lot of room to kind of like each educator's discretion. So it's important that you are kind of asking your child, what are they reading, asking what they are learning about, just so that you get to know more about how the teacher is implementing the curriculum. And just for an example here, so I just pulled up like a grade 3 math expectation. So when they're in grade 3, students are supposed to be able to read, write, add, and subtract numbers up until 1,000. So it just progresses from there. I think grade 2, it's like 100. Grade 1, it's like 10. So it just moves in a step progression. So you can always check and see, okay, what is my child learning on? This is a new curriculum that was just implemented, which includes financial literacy, something that we didn't have before. So making a budget. We also talk about like interest and credit cards and debt. And then it also talks about coding, which has been added into the curriculum, and social emotional learning. So like, how is your emotions when you're learning? How are you as a learner? Are you frustrated, and how to deal with frustration when you are approaching your education and learning new subjects. So this just came out in 2020, so it's supposed to be more fulsome. Again, we don't have like textbooks. So the textbooks that I have in my school right now, they're over 20 years old. So some educators may pull resources from them, but they still talk about like CDs and things that are not relevant today. So it's just, again, open to a lot of interpretation. So it's always important to just really be involved and really see what your students are bringing home, see what they're learning, ask lots of questions, talk to the teacher just to get a better sense of what's going on. So, and again, sometimes when you come to Canada, you don't realize that there's anti-Black racism within the schools. So it is very prevalent. It's very real. Our school system was definitely built out of colonialism, Eurocentric and ideals and values. And so it's important that new cultures and people coming into Canada and how do they see themselves in the curriculum and how do they see themselves in the school system? So anti-Black racism would be sometimes students would come in. This happened when I was younger. If they came from a country outside of like Europe, they would be placed in a lesser grade. So they would be placed, if they were supposed to be in grade 3, they would be bumped down to grade 2, just because of where they're from. Sometimes you see hyper surveillance of Black students. So those Black students always getting in trouble, but the educators are always having eyes on the Black students in the classroom. Having lower academic expectations, just looking at Black students and not thinking that they are going to achieve an A. Just again, the Eurocentric teaching practices, they're only reading books that have like white people as the main character, white people doing things, only learning about scientists and engineers and inventors that are white and don't have different cultural backgrounds. That is anti-Black racism because there's a wealth of knowledge that we can pull from, and it's not just from Europe. It was, they used to ban do-rags. Having head ties used to be banned in schools. And it was like, sometimes you would just want to cover your hair or put a band on. And I remember even when I went to high school, having just a band to like cover your edges, that was banned. And that was just for me, for my hair, but that was part of like anti-Black racism. Disproportionate disciplinary action. So Black students were being suspended more. And the study just came out with the Durham District School Board where it was proven like Black students were being suspended at higher rates than any other students within the board. Also, a lack of representation. So how can students see themselves if there's no representation in the staff or the curriculum? And it would also be encouraging the Black students to do sports, to play basketball, to make sure that they're involved in the sports and lesser on the academics. And so like it has an effect. And sometimes you can't pinpoint it to just one thing, but if you notice that when your students come, like they used to love school before they came to Canada, and now they don't want to go to school. They're having trouble sleeping. They have this sense of dread about coming to school. Those are all things that are part of anti-Black racism. Isolation, loneliness, just feeling like being the othered and tokenism. So all those things take a effect on the student and on their health. Lower grades and disengagement. They, again, in the study was that Black students scored 10% lower than average, right? So in English and in math, just as a whole. And it's horrible. Like, like we have the same knowledge, but why is it that we are not achieving at the same level? And so some of the things that you can do to counteract anti-Black racism is really connect with your child's teacher. So we just had parent-teacher interviews. We're the Durham board. Being able to, even if you couldn't make it in person, calling the teacher, signing up for communication. They have remind apps and different ways to communicate. Make sure that you're asking, oh, what book did you read today? And even we love a book. If you love a book as a family, introduce it to the teacher and say, you know what, this isn't a Nancy book. This is a nice cultural book that we have. It would be nice for, your class to read it, right? You could even, if you have time, to offer to volunteer or join the parent council. So there's different ways that you can get your face seen in school and to kind of help counteract, because sometimes when they don't see parents and no one's checking in on their students, and it's so easy to get complicit in the ways that they've been doing for so many years before. And then I'm going to just move on. Is any questions about anti-Black racism? Anyone noticed it in the school system or didn't know what it was called, but now they can kind of say, okay, you know what? My student may be experiencing this. Feel free to, if anyone wants to comment or leave anything in the chat. Naomi, did you want to talk?
No.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, this was from before. Okay. The other part of the school system that we have our individual education plans, and that is IEPs. So that is if your student does have a learning disability or needs some support within the school system, they can get one of those. There used to be a lot of stigma against having an individual education plan, but now it's being more widely accepted and it's encouraged to ensure that your student is successful. So it is just a written document that they will keep in the OSR, and it's a living document. So it's always going to stay with your student until they don't need it anymore. And it grows with your students. So as they improve, so does the IEP. It just includes like their date of birth, their strengths and needs, and any accommodations or modifications to the program. So some of the accommodations, so sometimes students may need just a little bit of accommodation to their learning. So they may not be able to add and subtract up to 1,000. Maybe they can only add up to 1,000, but with a calculator or with support. So just things that could help them be successful within their education journey. And sometimes they may need a modification where they're not adding and subtracting up to 1,000, they're just adding and subtracting up to 100. And when they master that, then they can move up to 1,000. So sometimes students move at like just a different pace, and the individual education plan kind of adjusts for that. And they can also be alternative programs. So altogether, they may need like an alternative learning program that's outside of the skills that are in the curriculum. And you'll be aware of that too as well as the parent. And there's always consultation before anything gets put in place.
Melissa, there's a question in the chat regarding the IEP.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Oh, I can't see the chat. Hold on, let me see.
Oh, it's in question and answer, sorry.
Oh, in the question and answer. Okay, okay. Oh, perfect. I see that now. Okay. Oh, okay. So what factors determine if and when an IEP is no longer needed for students? You know what? It generally comes when they do the review every year. And if they see that the student is kind of making the goals um, independently, then they can say, you know what, we don't need an IEP anymore. A lot of times too, when you go to high school, you have so much other supports that can be put in place, like use of technology is more accepted. Definitely like in elementary school, you don't get to use calculators as much, but when you go into high school, calculators, using computer, like all those can really help students become successful. So it's definitely like a conversation with the students, the parents, the educators. And if they feel like, you know what, they don't need to have that plan in place, then it can be they don't need to put it anymore. Does that answer your question? Yes, and it's written with the classroom teacher, support staff, all together writing the report. So they're going to see like if a student's really making gains. I think recently for me, I had a student who was modified in social studies, and then I was with them and I thought, you know what, they don't need that anymore. So we just took that out. But it's a conversation with the parent first. And then they agreed. And then we took out social studies on their IEP, and they could just learn alongside the class. and it adapts, right? So it adapts to your child's changing needs. And there's regular discussions around it. So you're really involved in all the process, and you can at any point and say, like, I want to review this. I think my child is getting it. I want it reviewed. Thank you so much for your question. So who needs one? Students who have a learning disability, students who are gifted, and students with physical or developmental challenges. So there can also be IEPs for behavior, some of the learning skills. If students need help with organization part, that could be put on their IEP, and they could have specific goals to help them with organization. And that's in like cases where students are not successful within the classroom because of their inability to be able to organize. So the benefits of having one are it's personalized, right? There's a lot of clear communication between teachers and parents, and there is consistent support through all levels. And so that just goes over the identification. I don't want to take up too much time. So again, to kind of ensure your student, you want to set them up for success. You want to make sure that you kind of really invest in their learning, right? Make learning fun, make them excited to go to school, establish consistent routines. Like everything is teaching time management skills, celebrate all little successes. Just you really want to encourage them with every step of the way, right? We know that school, they were going to face anti-Black racism if they're a Black student, but you want to build them up at home as much as you can, and really try to set goals, really help them. I know sometimes some places do free tutoring programs too as well, like if they are struggling. And always, always communicate with your classroom teacher. I think that is the key takeaway. Like you want to be in constant communication just so that they know that you are there and you care about their education, and they can also offer any help and support for them for your child to succeed. Sorry. Any other questions? Oh, I find that school staff are not even having conversations with parents about even putting their kids on IEP safety plan. They're taking the time to explain the purpose of this. Can be weaponized. Yes, Black kids. And I wonder what your advice is for parents. What advice for your parents to advocate for our children? Yeah, so you know what? It's a double-edged sword. So they used to always put Black students on behavior safety plans or IEPs disproportionately more than other students. But for me, my thing, it holds them more accountable. So you really want to see what their reasoning is behind it, like what proof they have, what documentation they have. And you're entitled to meet with the teachers, the admins, the support staff at any time, right? This is publicly funded education. You have a right to meet and see, okay, so if they're saying that your child needs an IEP, what's their reasoning behind it? And then you can ask, what supports are they doing within the classroom to help my child succeed, right? Because we can't put all the students on an IEP. So what are they doing to kind of help students who maybe they need to sit closer? Maybe they're not reading books that are engaging. Maybe they don't have any Black protagonists in the books and those type of things. Why? And then the other hand, for a behavior safety plan, if they feel like the student has bigger behaviors, when do those behaviors happen? What does it look like? All that needs to be documented, right? Like they can't just spring that on you. They need to document when their behaviors happen, what do they look like, for how long. All these things need to be documented, and they should be able to show you that documentation. Of what are parents' right to find out that their children have been put on an IEP? So no, parents need to be parents need to be notified for an IEP. They can't do that. Behavior safety plan, they do not need to, because that's something within the school, but No, they have to. So I would talk to the stop sharing here. The administration. And if you're not getting clear answers, contact the superintendent. Sometimes they have that on the website, but they can't make an IEP without the parents consult. And with every step, so like if I've made a change, I told you about the social studies that I made a change on the IEP. I had to contact the parents and let them know and see if they are okay with that before I made that change. So IEPs, they cannot do that without parents' consent, but behavior safety plan, they can. But if they're making a behavior safety plan, so say they're saying your child has have big behaviors, um, just ask to see the documentation, when, where, how often this is happening. Is it if are they hungry, and also what strategies have they put in place before they came to this? So that answers some. But definitely reach out to the administration. And also here with Kajanga, we're also parent advocates. So if you need someone to kind of advocate for you, advocate with you within the school system, we can do that as well. Okay. And there's plenty parent groups too, that help advocate for parents who feel that there are injustices within the school system. Oh, several times. So they cannot do an IEP without the parents. So I would either contact us and just see where we can go from there. But the IEP, it's a legal document, but it has to be created with the parents. That's not okay. And I would talk to the superintendent about that for sure. Yeah, that's crazy. Okay. What does it look like for the school to so they just basically, it's when you meet with the parents, you're looking at your students' strengths and their needs. So if they need like language and math, that's what they're forming the IEP on, right? It should be on language supports and math support. If they need organization skills, or if they need self-regulation skills, then it should look like that. But it's basically what your students' needs are. They pick a couple needs, and then the teacher will formulate an IEP, and then they bring it home, they send it home, and the parents look at it. And if they don't like it, or something is not okay, then they can ask to come in and meet. Because it's sent home to review. So anytime they send home an IEP, that's for review. And then you can say, okay, you know what, I don't like this, and this, and this, and then bring it back. If you need someone to be with you to help support that, you can always bring in a friend, someone to help you navigate that. But anytime it's sent home, it's for review. Nothing is set in stone. It's a review only. So it's just a back and forth. They write down what they think, and then you go through, and then you send it back and say, I don't like this, and this, or think they need support in A, B, C, and D. That makes sense. Awesome. Thank you so much for the questions. But definitely reach out to us. I think our email through the webinar, and we could connect if you would like more information too as well. And if you need help advocating, because you can't do an IEP without the parents. That's not a thing. They shouldn't be doing that at all. It doesn't matter the board at all. Thank you so much. All right. So I think if the Kajenga team wanted to come up, I'm going to remove my spotlight. If not, Chris, I think Chris is next.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, I am gonna try my best to make sure there's not any technical stuff going on here. I had to present earlier today, and I, for whatever reason, couldn't get this to work properly. So let's see if it does the trick now. Uh, okay, that looks like it's still doing the same.
Oh, I love your slides though. Those are nice.
Thank you. Is that showing as slides, or are you still seeing
I see
presenter
everything.
view?
Yeah.
You
Hmm.
see everything?
Hmm.
Okay, so if I go, do you see everything now,
Uh,
or just the slide?
not, we don't see anything right now.
Okay, so I'm just going to do this then. Okay, let's go here and then let's start.
Okay, just the slides now.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, the slides.
okay.
Hmm.
And for some reason, okay, I'm not seeing my notes. So what I'm going to say is thank you so much for having me. My name is Chris, as I said earlier, and I'm the anti-Black racism lead for the Catholic Children's Aid Society of Hamilton. Um, and, you know, Hamilton is a bit away, ways away from the Durham region. It's about an hour and a half by car. But I grew up in the Durham region, and when we think about all of the things that go into kind of seeing more Black children in the child welfare system, it's fairly similar across Ontario. So though, I might be speaking from a Hamilton perspective, some of the things are very similar. And I'm happy to have Kevin here as well, who is from Durham, who is going to be presenting some of this information with me. Some other housekeeping things, because I can't really see my notes on the screen in front of me, I may be shifting a little bit, looking to the side here or looking down because I'm an over preparer and I have multiple screens open just in case this didn't work. So I'll be doing some of that. Um, so this navigating child welfare presentation was really adapted from another resource put out by the One Vision, One Voice program. And it's the Navigating the Child Welfare System, a guide for Ontario's Black community. And so a lot of the information that you will be hearing from me can also be seen in that guide. I'll post a link to it because there's an online version that you can access afterwards. So the other piece of that too is that this presentation was developed with a lot more participation pieces, and it was also developed to be in an hour to 2 hour slot. So I'm really going to try to shrink it down a bit as we go along. So again, hello. I kind of just did the intro there, but I also like to include these in my presentation so that you get a better sense of who I am and why topic is particularly of interest to me. So I am a queer Jamaican immigrant to Canada, and that's important, particular for conversations around child welfare because as was mentioned earlier, a lot of the folks that we're seeing come in contact with child welfare are newcomers and immigrants. And so I came here in high school. I came here with an understanding of what parenting looked like based on the parenting that I received, but the expectations of Canada is different. And so I very much understand that, in different scenarios and um, there was a high risk of me and my younger siblings being involved with child welfare based on the parenting that I received, but based on the parenting that I knew came out of love, years later. So those are some of the things to keep in mind as we frame this conversation today. And I should also say, Kevin, if anything comes up, please feel free to step in before I shift slides or tell me to go back. I'm happy to do that as well.
Yeah, Chris, I'll jump in maybe just right now. Just going off of what you said, just feeding off of what you said. I think one of the things that why I'm interested in being a part of this presentation and what we at Durham Children's Day are seeing recently is that there is a higher kind of representation, higher kind of call information on Black families, particularly from parts of Africa, around some of the topics that we're going to touch on, primarily physical discipline and physical discipline with the object. So I think that that's one of the things that I just kind of want to home in right from the beginning, and maybe we could have some healthy conversation about it and try to direct, steer people in the healthy way and the Southern Ontario way. You know what I mean? I think that that's part of what I think should be the takeaway is that we all live here in Southern Ontario, and there's some kind of ideas and expectations and thoughts around child rearing in Southern Ontario. So we'll get all into all of that. But I just you kind of broached on it, so I just wanted to jump right there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so let's get into it and do like a kind of rundown of child welfare and what it is that we mean when we talk about child welfare. So, child welfare is a set of government and private services designed to protect children from abuse and neglect and encourage family stability. In Ontario, children's aid societies are tasked with legally making sure children are protected, and this happens 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And so, we have day workers that receive calls. In my agency, and as I'll kind of touch on as we go along, in my agency, we call them screeners. Different agencies use different naming systems, but a screener will receive a call, and then that's how a family really start. That's how that engagement and involvement starts. Um, After hours, there is another set of screeners that happen that are not necessarily from the same agency. And so I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but in Hamilton, there are two CASs, and sometimes or after hour screeners are from the other CAS, where there are very different practices, very different policies, and so on. So those are things to keep in mind as we talk about this. So the responsibilities of a CAS are set out in the Child, Youth, and Family Services Act 2017. And what this means is that how we carry out our work is very much dictated by the government. And so there are times where interpretation can lead to different practices, but at the root of the practice is what this act is saying. And sometimes there's not a lot of room around what can be done in terms of certain policies and procedures. And so if we receive a call and that person who's calling says a very specific thing, we have to respond in a certain way, whether it's going out immediately within, the first 12 hours, or if it's going out the next day, little pieces like that. So,
Chris, if I could just suggest something. In different
yes.
regions, I think the screening process is a little different. In Durham, we also respond to any police involvement that has a child in the home, most likely. So this is a of criminal nature, any police involvement that has a child in the home, we will receive that police report and we will make a judgment on it. That doesn't mean that we're going out on all of these. That doesn't mean that you'll hear from us, but we're making a judgment call because the police was at that residence the night before, hours before we received that police report. So just to let everyone know that this is not just phone conversations or people calling in, that it could also be police reports. It could also be very I seen this person walk by my house. I know they live, X amount of doors down. I don't know this person. So it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that's well known to you or anything like that. Just wanted to clarify some of that.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah, so child welfare services are typically delivered through a children's aid society in each region of Ontario. These have different names, organizational structures, policies, programs, and so on, kind of what we've been hinting at the beginning of the presentation. So you might hear child welfare be referred to as CAS, the short for Children's Aid Society, Child Protection Services, CPS, Child and Family Services, and Family Services. And kind of a foreshadowing, I mentioned that Hamilton has two CASs. The other CAS recently changed their name from Hamilton CAS and is now called Hamilton Child and Family Services. And so there's some shift around that. And I believe what was explained to me was the shift to a new name was to challenge and deconstruct some of the power systems that exist and what comes or what whenever people hear some of these um, typical names, because there's a lot of harm that has been done to both the Black community, Indigenous communities, other communities, by children's aid societies. And so there's this push to really challenge some of those structures. Yeah, I've already covered this piece, but as mentioned, I'm with Catholic Children's Aid Society of Hamilton. Um, Different regions have several CASs. Some only have one. I believe Durham only has one. Um,
Yeah, Durham has Durham Children's Aid, but we also have Nagdwigamog Benoje that responds to our Indigenous community. Toronto would have Toronto CAS,
mhm,
Child and Family Services. Um, they would have Catholic Child and Family Services. They would have Jewish Child and Family Services. They
mhm,
would have, I believe, Nagdwigamog, also parts of Toronto. They also have
mhm,
Native Child, that also, so another indigenous child welfare service. So some regions have many, like it's a big region like Toronto, or the population so big. Some might have faith-based or organizations that are considered child protection agencies.
yeah. And I think that we're also associated with Native Child here in Hamilton. Um, but the major difference in terms of which one of these services or CASs you come in contact with is really that spiritual piece. And so, if, for example, our screener is receiving information and this family, or rather during investigation, and this family doesn't really identify, spirituality as something that's important for them, then perhaps they go to the other CAS and vice versa. And so it's really that spiritual piece that connects folks to our services. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be Catholic. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to go to church every Sunday. It's just how spirituality plays out within a person's life. And that really, because we center spirituality, that makes some of our practices different from, let's say, a non spiritual CAS. And I believe it would be the same across regions in terms of, in Toronto, where the focus, for example, with the Jewish CAS is on that particular community. So, as we've kind of hinted at in terms of how families get involved, families can be referred by anyone in the community who believes that a child may have been harmed or might be at risk of harm. And so that can be, a family member, it can be a friend, it can be a neighbor, And it most definitely can be community service providers or people who work with children, like the police, teachers, daycare workers, doctors, and so on. And so I really appreciated that we went after Melissa's presentation, particularly hearing about some of the ways that you can engage and advocate with the school system, because that plays a huge part in terms of folks entering child welfare. When we look at what is called mandated referrers across Ontario, schools are number one in terms of the folks that are referring Black children specifically to child welfare. Police are next, then folks in the hospitals, and then other community organizations. And so in Hamilton, that looks a little bit different. It's flipped, which I find surprising. It's police first and then schools, but that does not mean that schools aren't being extremely harmful in terms of racism and bias that is kind of intrinsic in some of their reasonings for reporting families to our services specifically. Just making sure that I covered everything here. Okay, right. So I mentioned mandated referrers, which it's a child welfare term that really covers all of those folks that have a duty to report. So these folks are legally responsible to contact a children's aid society whenever there is a concern that a child is not safe. Um, as with anything, with everything, interpretation is a huge thing. And so when we think about a concern of a child not being safe, that is also left to interpretation. And as we'll talk about a little bit later when we think about the role that racism, anti-Black racism, bias plays in terms of what people start thinking are concerns, um, this can be a huge problem. Um, yes, a duty to report is huge in terms of protecting our children, but it can also be a huge problem when folks who aren't aware of their own biases, aren't aware of, some of the practices that they have that are rooted in some of the bigger structural pieces like anti-Black racism, it can also be harmful. So, as I mentioned earlier, in Hamilton, Indigenous and Black children are represented. These families tend to be reported at a higher rate, even though they're not more likely to need CAS involvement. And an example of this, as Kevin mentioned earlier, is that Black families get reported quite often for reasons such as hitting. And when we do investigation, um, we find out that there is not a lot of substantial evidence that says there is an actual child safety concern. And so what this means is that Black families are getting reported quite frequently for things that turn out to be nothing. And so those are some of the pieces that we think about when we're talking about child welfare involvement. So what do child welfare services do? They investigate when they receive a call about a child under the age of 16 who may need protection. They work to protect children and prevent situations requiring the protection of children, provide protection for children who have been harmed or are at risk of harm, supervise children assigned to their supervision, provide care for children who have been removed from their homes, and place children for adoption. Um, so Children's Aid Society they do have a legal power that allows them to remove children from their family or home due to confirmed child safety concerns. Um, and I bold and underline confirmed here because there has to be rationale behind it. We can't just come into your family and say we're taking your kid. There needs to be, like, if you were to ask the reason, there needs to be documented reasoning for why this is happening. But when children are removed from their families, children in societies should always prioritize placing children with other family members, what we call kin, or friends, what we call kith. When kin or kith are not an option, children may be placed in a foster home or group home. When there is no possibility of a child returning to their family or home, other forms of substitute cares like adoption and family-based custody arrangements are what we think about. Okay, so that was hopefully a quick run through of the child welfare. And now we're going to talk about some of the meatier pieces around parental responsibility. So parents have a responsibility to provide safe and loving homes for their children. This does not necessarily mean your home needs to be perfect, but you should always try to make sure your children are well cared for, safe, and well loved. So I have some questions here that I won't take too much time on just in the best interest of time, but I want you to think about what do you think about this expectation of parents and how do you provide safe and loving home for your children? Um, when we ask this question, what often happens is that folks are really sharing how they're taking care of their kids, how they're showing love for their kids, but that can look so different across families and so different across cultures. And so when we think about this Canadian um, kind of standard for parental responsibility, and then when we think of the very different ways that families show love to their kids, sometimes there's a disconnect. And oftentimes that's where we end up in situations where Black families are being reported for things that may not even be on their radar, right? And when we think about some of the mandated referrers like schools, like the police, there's no communication with the parents before reporting us. It's just an immediate report. And then families are kind of blindsided as to why they're receiving a call from a CAS worker the next day. So those are some of the things to just think about there. So, yes. Oh, I thought you were gonna.
If I could interject, just say two things. One is that one of the things that I think people should give some thought to is that the teachers in the schools, while there's an underline that says a duty to report, this duty to report is kind of a mandate that was given to all teachers some years back, and this mandate often is confused and sometimes not well thought out as to when they call the children's aid societies, and they're not required to check in with parents first, though they should, they're not necessarily required to. So this is where we sometimes see the over representation of Black families within the children's aid, especially when it's coming through the school system, is that there's something that may not might be unsettling to some degree, some questions, so forth. Rather than teasing that out, sometimes it's something that maybe shouldn't be teased out, but quite often it's something that possibly could be teased out. Rather than teasing that out with parents and individuals in the family, they're calling children's aid, and so that's one of the areas. But also, I think, thinking of Caribbean community, thinking of maybe even African communities, African nations, how we care for our children sometimes looks quite different. I mean, having a child in a small apartment or something like that for long hours, teenage boys or girls, um, in the Caribbean, kids playing outside, unsupervised is not something that is not a problem for. There's no lack of supervision there. They're playing outside. The outside is okay's place to play. In our community, this is, children are expected to be supervised at all times. So there are some nuances to it that is just some why Black families seem to be well, not seem to be, they are overrepresented in the child welfare system. And I think some of it is some of these reasons, but primarily the schools and the teachers and the duty to report, that inherent, I should report this without any kind of thought to talking to parents, is can be quite problematic.
Thank you. I'll also share, like, even in that space of supervision, right? Some folks come from cultures where their neighbors are looking after their kids, and here it could possibly be your neighbor that's reporting, right? And so there's some of those disconnecting pieces in terms of culture. Okay, so I think we are vastly running out of time. So let me try to get through these pieces, because I think these are some of the huger ones. So disciplining your child, which is, as we mentioned earlier, physical abuse is one of the rationales given for reporting families, Black families, a lot. So in Canada, child discipline is covered under the criminal code. And the criminal code says that caregivers can only use minor corrective force or physical punishment. Spanking or slapping is acceptable. However, if it is hard enough that it causes a mark or bruise, this could be considered excessive and a criminal act in Canada. So objects like belts and rulers must never be used, according to the criminal code. And a child must never be hit or slapped in their face or on their head. And so as I'm going through this, I want folks to think about, maybe how they discipline their kids, how they've been disciplined. I can tell you right off the bat that 1 and 2 already is out for my family. Um, so physical punishment cannot be used on children younger than 2 years old or older than 12 years old. Physical punishment cannot be used on a child in anger or in retaliation for something a child did. So if that child stayed out too late, and came home at a time past when they were supposed to, and you hit them, that would be considered, or could be interpreted as, retaliation for something they did. And that's a criminal offense in Canada. Any use of force on a child cannot be degrading, inhumane, or result in harm or the prospect of harm. And we think here in terms of emotional harm. If a child experiences anxiety or depression as a result of their discipline, these are some of the things that are protected under the criminal code. Physical punishment cannot be used on a child who is incapable of learning from the situation because of a disability or some other factor, right? And so I think about all the kids who have undiagnosed disabilities, who are just not aware of why they're being disciplined, um, would fall under this protection here. Um, and the seriousness of the child's misbehavior is not relevant to deciding whether the force used was reasonable. The force used must be minor, no matter what the child did. So even if, you know, you're arguing that, look at the severity, look at the high risk of what this child has done, you can't, like, that doesn't hold up under the criminal code. It doesn't justify anything in terms of the physical discipline that you're applying. Um, Usually I would pause here and ask for some reflections on this, but I'm just going to keep going, because this is another important piece that we see within our community, where it's leaving children by themselves. As Kevin mentioned earlier, children must always, always, always have some form of trusted adult supervision. And so in Ontario, under the Child, Youth, and Family Service Act, it does not specifically state a minimum age that children can be left unsupervised, but it does explain that there has to be some form of arrangement for children under the age of 16. And they cannot be out by themselves between midnight and 6 a.m. Um, we recommend, though, that children younger than 10 are not left alone at any time without a competent caregiver. Um, there's always a competent caregiver on the same premises. So you can't say, my friend, my neighbor who lives next door is watching them and the kid is in the house by themselves. And children younger than 12 must never be left alone to care for other children. And this is a tough one. I know that, for example, I've worked with a lot of families from the Caribbean who said, well, they're teenagers now, right? And they should have some responsibility looking after their siblings. But a child welfare worker who's coming in is going to view that very differently, right? They're going to look at that as you potentially parentalizing that child, and that poses a risk. So just a in bold statement here because sometimes as parents we have to navigate tough choices, and work is a huge one, right? You need work, and some parents prioritize work because that's how you're going to take care of your kids. If you don't have the money to take care of your kids, that's a huge thing. However, you can never leave your child alone without supervision, even if you have to go to work. Okay, so I think I'm going to skip this question just because we've covered some of those pieces as to why it's important. But I will give some snapshots and Kevin feels free to add. Um, this is important because we know there's an overrepresentation, right? In Ontario, Black children make up 7% of the population. But when you look at child welfare investigations, 14% of child welfare investigations are Black children. And that 14% looks very small, but when you compare 14% to the 7%, that's almost double, right? So what it's saying is that almost double the representation of Black kids are involved in child welfare. And that's a huge thing that we need to account for. Um, there are other pieces that we also need to consider: anti-Black racism, bias, um, not a lot of community services that can take the place of child welfare, right? And so I think about, which is why it's so important here to be hearing some of those resources that are available in Durham, because when we think about, or when I listen to reasons why some places involve child welfare, it's because they're looking at things like poverty. Oh, well, the parent doesn't have enough food. Okay, so then have you thought about connecting them with a food bank, right? We, as a child welfare agency with all of this power to take away kids, doesn't necessarily have to be involved in those situations. And when we think of the duty to report, we want to think about shifting that to a duty to support. So rather than immediately call us, how are you supporting that family address some of the concerns? Are the concerns actually child protection concerns, right? Is this child unsafe in this environment, or does this family just not have enough food for today? So those are some of the critical things.
One more thing,
I
Chris,
know,
if I could just jump in.
yes,
I think one
yes,
other thing that
please.
I think is super critical and worth stating is that right, especially around the discipline, the spanking with objects, the spanking leaving marks, people can find themselves in front of the courts, criminally charged, serving time for what they believe to be corrective discipline on their child. This has happened, this can happen, and for Black people, this will happen. So this is, I think, another reason why, we like to have everybody to know what it is that they're, the expectations, the thoughts, the feelings around it, so that they can adjust accordingly, because there's nothing, I'm sure, nothing more disheartening than to find yourself in front of criminal court for something that you viewed as a corrective discipline, and then with court comes costs, with court comes loss of work, wages, with court often comes separation of family. The person charged often can't be with the individuals they're charged against. With court comes so many factors that it's it could be quite mind-boggling, quite like just the way how our judicial system works and how it treats families. It happens. It's quick and it's very specific, and it's not something that one can just explain their way out of.
Mhm.
It takes a process all on its own. So I'm sure that could be a webinar in and of itself. So you know,
Yeah.
um, please, we want to give you the information to be able to, equip yourself with the knowledge and to move accordingly or to, care for your children accordingly.
Absolutely. And I do want to, as I wrap up, want to also say that the information that I'm sharing here on this, like the spanking that we're talking about, the spanking, the hitting, it doesn't necessarily mean that that happens more frequently within the Black community compared to, for example, the white community. But because of anti-Black racism, because of the biases that exist in our or in Canada, we experience higher level of surveillance, higher level of scrutiny. And so the eyes are always on us. And so when Kevin says it will likely happen, that is true because we're having the eyes on us, right? And so even if this is happening to your neighbor, your white neighbor down the street, like they're doing the same exact thing, the likelihood is that you're the one that is going to get the call on because everyone is watching you for how you're disciplining your kid. So these are some of the things to think about as you kind of like digest this content. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat and I'll try to answer them in the chat as we go along, but just want to return that space for the next presenters.
Thank you so much, Chris. This is a presentation that my parents needed to take. um,
Mine too, trust me.
yeah, so and it's so important. I think one person wrote in the question and answer, a lot of newcomers to Ontario are not given the information about the role of the Children's Aid Society. So that's huge. A lot of the laws and the rules that they have in place, you're not going to know if you're just coming into Canada. You're just trying to navigate living as opposed to actually like knowing all the rules and regulations. And I just want to give a quick example. Last week, one of the educators wanted to call Children's Aid on a Black student who was throwing up. So he was running and he had a cough, and every time he coughed, he'd throw up, but he was fine. But because mom didn't come to pick him up, they were like, okay, so who do we call? And I was like, well, he doesn't have the flu, and like the flu looks a lot differently. Um, and that's like he doesn't have that, but it's more along the lines of sorry, of they don't have that relationship. I'm like, mom can't just drop everything because her son's running and coughs and throws up. That's 2 days out of daycare. So that's 2 days loss of work. So if she doesn't work, she doesn't get paid. So having that lens was something that they didn't even think. They're like, let's call Children's Aid. She's neglecting him. And I'm like, he's not sick. He's just coughing and throwing up. But that happens in school. These are real conversations that are happening. We just want to bring it up to any questions. I think this has been a lot of like wholesome information. I don't know if Teja, you wanted to interject or any questions. I could put my contact information too in the chat. This has been so beneficial. Or any final thoughts? Oh, there you are. Let me pin you up.
No, definitely. I just want to say actually good night to everyone. And just first and foremost, before we even close off for the night, thanks to all the speakers. I think this is a session that we just don't have enough conversation about. Especially not just for newcomer families, but just for all families in general. especially the fact that this is a lot of stigma around these type of conversations. Um, and I think that for a lot of people in institutionalized settings, such as schools, hospitals, they think that this is just information that we know. But again, if it's not posted or if the resources are not anywhere for the families to receive them, then a lot of our families end up being in positions where I'm going to say in air quotes, get in trouble or they have to be over surveillanced because of a lot of which I find is miscommunication that we have when it comes to how Western society deals with Black, Indigenous, and racialized people just in general. So thanks everyone for just kind of just sharing all that information because the more that we share, the more that we can grow and kind of change some of these biases that people do have, not just amongst the Black community, but all communities in general. But before we kind of close out, just want to share like the importance of sharing resources. I hope everyone has been in the chat to make sure that they're following all our speakers, all the organizations that are here to actually help and give resource. Um, I think something that we have to kind of put in big, bright yellow letters is free. So don't feel like you, after today's session, you have to go and pay to talk to any of these people or pay for support. Everything is absolutely free for resource. It's for you to take advantage of. Taking advantage of this is actually an amazing thing. So please do that. Um, Also, I'm just going to share my screen very, very quickly. Um, so we do have other upcoming events where we talk to other very important organizations, which ends up being even more resource for our community. So this is just a QR code to scan to go to our events page. So you can also get more information. And last but not least is the importance of surveying. And I know we're probably surveyed out. Poor Durham, our community, we probably get a survey out every week, but I'm telling you, it's important that you sign those surveys because we want to make sure that we continue to give you the proper resources that are needed. So we could also have sessions to properly inform you. We don't want to give you a session which you feel like you don't need. So I'm also going to drop that in the chat as well. Please provide your feedback. If you enjoyed the session today, um, let us know your thoughts. If you know if there's anybody who would like more information, any questions that you have, please feel free to kind of fill it in on that survey sheet. And thank you so much again, Melissa, for just moderating the session. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Kevin. And Nicole and Naomi, I see you, even though your faces are not here. Thank you and everyone else for coming out tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.